Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is Steve Starr, Director of Carrier Ops from SignalWire. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, as usual, would you like to start with a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, I can do that. So I have been with SignalWire for it's coming up on 2 years now at this point. And then before then, I spent about 17 or 18 years working telecom for a regional carrier. So I've been in telecom itself for nearly 20 years at this point. And we have some exciting times with RCS coming up right now. So it's good times in the US for that.
Good. Yeah. Well, I mean, the topic for today again is RCS. I was very interested when this came up because I'm really, being from Europe, RCS is something relatively new to our side. And I'm really interested. So, first of all, I'll ask the smart question. What is exactly RCS?
So RCS was created years ago as kind of the next generation messaging. It was designed to take over after SMS and MMS. RCS stands for Rich Communication Services, and so the idea was this would enable a richer, better messaging experience. But it didn't really take off for a little bit, and then Google picked it up for Android use, and then it started to gain some traction. Um, Apple didn't pick it up until later last year when it released support for it. But because Android did support it for some time, globally, RCS or RBM, which is RCS business messaging, has been out there in the wild for some time now. Because globally, Android has about 70% market share. In the US, though, it's a little flipped, and Apple has the majority of the market share of phones. And so, because of that, RCS never took off in the US. But now that Apple's supporting it, RCS is beginning to take off in the US and growing in parts around the world as well. So it becomes very exciting to see this new product to finally start to emerge.
How does RCS compare to messaging, so SMS, and in turn, how does it compare to WhatsApp, Telegram, and the other platforms? Let's start with SMS.
Okay, let's start with SMS. So you have to look at it in a couple of different ways. So you have RCS, and then you have RBM, which is RCS business messaging. And if you look at those two different ways, RCS would be your peer-to-peer type messaging. So just sending a message between you and myself, for instance. RBM would be a business sending an RCS message to an end user. And there's some differences that go in between those two. But if we're just focused on RCS itself, the biggest difference between RCS and just SMS or MMS is that RCS is end-to-end encrypted. Our SMS, on the other hand, is not. It's just sent plain text. It's not secure, anything like that. And then on top of that, the other features you get is what you're able to send across. And so what you might find if you're in the US or somewhere that supports an MMS message, for instance, your message, if you're sending an image or a video, it gets compressed depending on who you're sending it to and who the carrier is. A lot of variables in there. But with RCS, it doesn't happen, and they support larger file sizes to be shared across, or even longer text. So sometimes your text would get segmented, based on like 160 characters. But with RCS, that's not the case, and you're able to send thousands of characters along and not have it be segmented.
Good. So that's RCS is effectively a standard that's sort of almost replacing SMS. I would say it's but it's going through the same channels. Like you don't need a specific platform to do it. I think that's where it compare. How does it compare to WhatsApp and Telegram? Is it WhatsApp is WhatsApp, Telegram is Telegram, RCS is a standard, and anybody can use it. Is that like that?
Yeah, that's essentially correct. So it's not a separate app like WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever. It's a protocol or service that's built into your device itself and within the carrier networks. So it is an over-the-top service, but it's also not an over-the-top service because it does work within the carrier networks, and works with the carrier and is directly integrated with your device. I mean, you can toggle it on and off in your device, but it uses your native messaging app, which also makes it more appealing because you don't have to go sign up for the service, go through all that, and have another account that you're worrying about using.
Hmm. That's interesting. So, yeah, I think this is going to be well. Is it bad then? I don't know if it's either here nor there, but this is sort of bad news for the app-based messaging. Like again, WhatsApp, Telegram. This is kind of a competitor to them.
Yeah, it definitely could be a competitor to them. I haven't seen a whole lot of data as to what they're expecting it to do with those apps. Each app offers a little, some advantages and disadvantages. For instance, we talked about end-to-end encryption with RCS, but RBM, on the other hand, RCS business messaging, is not end-to-end encrypted. And so if you're sending business messages out to end users, that's not fully encrypted. And it's just because it's a store and forward type of thing. So each hop has to be able to read the message and get that sent on. So there's no real way to encrypt that right now. WhatsApp, on the other hand, WhatsApp business messaging, for instance, is encrypted. And so there's advantages there that it does apply to, but RCS being very native, it's expected that that's going to just end up um, cannibalizing most of the messaging that happens out there, just because it is just going to be natively supported on the device.
Nice, yeah. So is it so RCS needs your device to support it, right? There's no way to make a device that doesn't have RCS support have it by downloading an app or something.
Right, correct. Yes, it works with your um mobile phone service. So like your mobile number is your ID that can send and receive RCS from your device. And so there's not a way to just sign up for an account and receive it.
Yeah, that's well, I mean, that's the same way most messaging apps works anyways.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's really exciting, and I think it's gonna make the it's gonna change the industry quite a bit from what I hear. What are the some cool features of RCS or the business version that you would like to point out that people might be interested in?
Yeah, yeah. So the business side has a lot of more advanced features that enable a richer experience. So we talked about the higher definition images and videos that you can send. Businesses can do that. But on top of that, you can do what are called carousels. They're kind of so when you send a RCS, it's called a rich card. It has an image and it has some text with it, and you can just scroll through these. But on top of that, you can add interactive buttons or quick reply buttons. And what that can do is you could send your user or your end user a few different options. And they can just click on a button to easily reply to a message. And then you, as the business who's sending it, would receive postback data as to what that user clicked. And then you can create, some sort of journey with the customer based on that. Maybe it's ordering something or trying to ask for help for something or whatever. There's all sorts of possibilities you can do with that. On top of that, you can share locations. So you could share a location to where your office is, or maybe the end users going to share their location with you, and you can receive that. or perhaps you want to send options so that the user can, it's a maybe you have an appointment reminder and you send it out, and then you can have the user just click a button that will automatically add that appointment reminder to their calendar
Nice.
with all the information, make calls, text. Like it's quite a range of options that you can do with it.
And that is built in without having to do anything as an application developer side, right?
Yeah, correct. It's built into the device itself. Some devices don't fully support all of them. So iPhone will support all these features. Apple keeps things pretty consistent. Android, it kind of depends on the Android release, but generally all of the features are supported.
That's very very nice. It's that's going to be a lot, a lot of interesting work for me. Even me as an application developer, there's a bunch of very very cool things. It feels like I could do there. And from a user and cost standpoint, say I'm a company that is currently using texting. Uh, would I switch to RCS for my messaging? That's a good question to ask. I think so. I'm one of those. There's a lot of political entities we work with. We are very
Mhm.
good customers, etc. They're sending a lot of texts. Will they switch to RCS and make sure? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, so SMS, it's RCS is expected to be a little bit more than what SMS is. Um, and there's some reasons behind that. So there's going to be like three different billing tiers, and we can't say for sure what the pricing is going to be because these contracts are actually still actively being negotiated with the mobile operators. And so there's no set pricing at the moment, but it will fall within three tiers. You'll have a basic message, which is just text. You'll have a rich message, which is, the buttons and the card and all that stuff. And then you'll have a conversational one. And the conversation is defined as just all the messages that are sent within a 24-hour period. And so maybe you're interacting with your customer and, you know, all those messages won't necessarily cost, individually, but as a whole, it'll be lumped into a whole conversation billing. Um, so it is expected to be a little bit more, but why would you want to do it? Especially if you are only sending text. The one thing I didn't touch on, as a feature that I should touch on is the branding and the trust that comes along with it. And so if you're familiar with how the US does it with 10DLC
Oh,
campaigns and registrations, it's a similar process for RCS. And what you have to do is you have to submit your brand and you have to submit, information about yourself and your logo and maybe a color and blurb about you, contact information, all sorts of stuff. And this gets sent on to the mobile operators and to Google for approval of it. And it takes a couple weeks to actually go through the approval process and make sure everything checks out. But once that's done, what you end up with is a branded messaging experience that the end user sees. And so maybe SignalWire sends out an RCS message. What the user will see is the SignalWire logo, their name with it, and a little thing about who SignalWire is, contact information with it, and even like this little shield, blue shield with the check mark showing that it's been verified and you can trust who it is. Right now with messaging, there's a lot of spammy stuff, and it's hard to know for sure who you can trust and who you can't trust with it. And so, if you're looking for a reason to, as to why you should spend more messaging using RCS instead of just SMS, the branded trusting is probably one of the biggest reasons why.
nice. Well, so you mentioned something interesting. The um, campaign registry, which is in place for sending to 10DLC with texting. Does
Mhm.
any of that apply to RCS?
No, not
Hmm.
directly to RCS itself. So TCR is not handling anything with RCS registrations at the moment. What you will need to consider is if you are going to handle fallback of RCS. And so if you have an RCS channel set up and you're going to send messages, what are you going to do if the end user you are sending it to has RCS turned off or doesn't support it or whatever reason? How are you going to contact that end user? Are you just going to fail the
Hmm.
messages, or are you going to fall back to an SMS or MMS? And in the US, if you're going to fall back, then you have to register the campaign still, to
Hmm.
make sure that you can complete that messaging. So it's just the consideration when you're thinking through how you want that experience to happen.
So it is not really a question of needing a campaign registration directly, but it's probably recommended to have one just in case to have to go through the various channels. So from a
Mhm.
provider perspective, this is from SignalWire. Say we will have we have an RCS product that's coming and it's going to be obviously great and like everything else. But the from our standpoint, say again, I'm a customer. Do I need to do anything in particular to plan for not my for my customers not always supporting RCS, or is it handled sort of almost automatically from a platform like SignalWire?
It would actually be best for you to handle that for your customers. And so I've had a few conversations with enterprise customers who have been looking at RCS and what they're going to do with it. And the majority of people out there say that they want to handle it for themselves. And the reason is that you want to control the experience that your end user has. And while SignalWire will end up releasing something that will allow for fallback of those messages. Um, Only you can really provide the experience that you want to provide. And so being able to build that in yourself would be the best way to handle it, because you have to consider, especially on the rich side of things, how you want to display it, because you can't directly take the quick reply buttons and the carousel images or the rich cards and create that as an MMS. It just doesn't translate well, and so you have to kind of figure out how you want to make that look and how you want to handle it. And so, like I said, most of the enterprise level customers, or even like larger businesses, are seeming to prefer to just handle that on their own. It SignalWire, we mostly work with ISDs who enable messaging of businesses themselves, and so it just makes sense that that's how it would happen.
So you will know if a customer supports RCS by the network response when you send them on one effectively.
Yes, we can also, we'll also provide ways to do lookups on numbers. And so if you want to scrub a list of numbers to identify RCS versus non-RCS, you can do that as well. And that way you're not just sending it and then waiting for an error or rejection or something and then trying something else. A couple of different ways to approach it to help make it as efficient as possible.
Nice. That's yeah. I think the it's this is going to change a lot. I'll be honest. I'm a voice person. You know me. I mean, I'm a platform person. I live in the back end, so I
Mhm.
live between servers, and this is really exciting. This is really a new thing that's going to change things a lot. How is it the rest of the world supporting RCS?
So what you will see is there's kind of spots, like it's kind of spotty around the country. So Europe, it's hit and miss. Like, there's countries in Europe that, widely support it and have been operating with it for years. And then there's other countries that have not been using it as much. And then LATAM, the same thing. Mexico, for instance, really big with RCS itself. I think Brazil's the same way, and so it it's typically where there's a very high Android adoption rate that you end up seeing RCS also highly adopted because most of the end users end up using it. So I guess in Italy, because you are talking a lot about it. Like, what are you seeing?
So in Italy, most people are on WhatsApp. I would say that's the overwhelming majority of messaging is
Yep.
gone over to WhatsApp, mostly because the adoption of iPhones. So a lot of people being on iMessage in the US stems from the fact that I don't even know the percentages, but I will wager that more than half of the phones in the US are Apple. While
Hmm.
over here, you have like 80% is Android. So unless something is supported by Android, it won't be a big, as you know, it's the herd effect. As in, if you're the only one that has an Apple phone, by definition, you can't use iMessage because there's nobody else to talk to you. And if you have only have one friend who has an Apple phone and you have 100 other friends that have Android, chances are you're not going to use iMessage for this one friend either because it's just too much work to figure it out and just
Yeah.
use the same channel for everybody. So I think the presence of Apple in the market inherently made people go to the third party platforms. That will
Hmm.
change with the adoption of Android, frankly, because for RCS on Android, because frankly people prefer not having to do anything, right? It just works. So it is
Right.
it's Android adoption is key, actually. Apple in Europe, I don't want to say I don't want to upset my friends at Apple, but Apple iPhones in Europe really almost don't matter. Like I probably know 3 or 4 other people who have an iPhone other than myself. It's interesting how the market is so different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
But
you're exactly right. It is quite a bit different, and I'm not surprised to hear about WhatsApp adoption there because that's typically what we see is you either have a high RCS adoption rate or you have a high WhatsApp adoption rate. And it probably is kind of just whatever took off first, and that's what people started using. But what will be very interesting to see is with Apple support if that is going to change. I almost expect it to begin to change and maybe even marketing campaigns coming out in support of one or the other to try and convince users. So it'll be interesting.
yeah, it really sounds like it's going to change the market. It's really exciting and it's huge. So,
Mm.
when can we expect to start using RCS widely, in your opinion?
So right now, rolling, it's been pretty much fully adopted by Verizon. T-Mobile is supposed to complete that somewhat soon. And then AT&T not until later. And so I say that it's when I say that I mean RCS business or RBM. RCS itself as a peer-to-peer messaging is pretty much out there for all of Androids and most iPhones, as long as you are updated to iOS 18.1. I think it was 18.1 that officially brought in all this support. And so, if we're looking at it from just a business messaging perspective, I would expect it to be 6 to 8 months still before it's really out there
Mhm.
as a thing. It's going to be a slower ramp up. We're going to have to go through. Everyone's going to have to go through integrations on getting it set up, go through the development process and the product process of it, and all of that, and start to get out there. But as far as like a peer to peer, it's out there. I have, I'm on a iPhone and I have quite a few friends who are on Android that I've noticed it starts to say RCS. And I found that interesting. And it provides a more reliable experience with messaging those people as well because it is kind of an over the top service. It works across your data or Wi-Fi or whatever as well, which is interesting. So I think peer to peer, it's pretty much there as far
Mhm.
as being widely adopted. But RBM, 6 to 8 months.
Well, that's still that's still an interesting development, and I think it's going to be a great platform for companies to start. I I don't want to say this the wrong way, but SMS can come across as a bit of spammy at times. You know, some people overdo it. It's marketing. Some marketing can be overdone. That's not a problem with the channel. RCS is probably going to help with that too because you know it's more structured. It's got a lot of components of WhatsApp and third party messaging without
Hmm.
having to actually be on a separate platform, which is it's very very interesting.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. It was very enlightening. As I was telling you before the recording, I actually didn't know much about RCS, so I my questions are all genuine. Like I didn't know, and now I do, which is very. It's probably the best way to go about explaining something. So, thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. This has been lots of fun. So thank you.
Well, we'll do it again next time. Maybe we'll go more into the business side of it, which is well, as soon as it's ready, which is going to be quite interesting. Maybe show a demo. There's a lot we could do. Well,
Yeah,
Steve Starr, Director of Carrier Operations at SignalWire, thank you for joining us today.
thank you.
And the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.